So, where do people start from? Hey, I'm Alex, and this is my writer's diary. I'm a software engineer by day, but I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I think I was 9 years old when my grandfather set up his old typewriter so I can write my first book, or so I wanted to do at the time. After writing a complete page of utter nonsense, I decided that this is too difficult, and maybe you need to know more than 200 words in order to write a book. So I put my dreams on the shelf for the time being, but I never stopped writing. I continued writing all throughout school. I wrote in high school, and I kept writing in my professional life when I became an engineer. But something that kept bothering me is that I never really pursued my dream to write fiction. So it was in the midst of the pandemic. I think I was 25 years old at that time, and for the first time in my life, I was faced with my own mortality. And I realized that I want to leave something behind me, and then you never know what's going to happen, and you want to accomplish as many of your dreams as you can. This was something that I could never stop thinking about. So much like when I was 9, I got a blank page again. I got a blank page, a pen, I sat down and I started writing. Well, not really, it was a Google Doc this time, but you get it. So I wrote another page of utter nonsense. And it was very bad, but this time I had a richer vocabulary than I did when I was 9, and I was more determined to publish something. After so many years of having this dream stuck in your head, I realized that it's never really gonna go away unless I do something, unless I write something. But then what am I doing here? Why am I publishing this video? If I have the dream to write, why am I not just writing? Why am I recording videos? Well, it turns out that writing can be a really lonely activity, because most of the time you are with the computer or with your notepad or with a piece of paper and a pen, and this is what keeps you company. It's only you, your thoughts, your ideas, and this abstract story that you have stuck somewhere in your head and you want to tell people. So I wanted to have a place where I could talk about my challenges as a writer, the things I'm going through, and share more details from behind the curtains. So I mentioned that I'm a software engineer, and something I learned along the way is that there are many similarities between programming and writing. You know, engineers don't want to admit that their work is art, and artists don't want to admit that their work is an algorithm, but it is. You know, if you take two writers, they are going to write down the same idea in a different way, and for each of them, their way and their approach to it is going to be the correct one. And it's the same in engineering. One developer is going to take one approach, the other is going to take a different approach. They're both going to solve the problem. Both their solutions are going to work, but they will look completely different, and both of them will be correct from their own viewpoint in doing it like this. If you think about it, programming is just the act of writing for a very small audience. You are writing only for the compiler and for your colleagues. So you want the code that you write to be correct so it can be understood by the compiler and it produces the correct end result. And you want it to be readable enough so your colleagues can understand it and they can make changes to it. When you're writing prose, you're just writing out to a wider audience. So you're writing to anyone who speaks the English language, for example. But in both cases, you are transferring some idea. When you are engineering a solution, you are transferring some business, some details, some concept from the real world into the world of software, and you're describing it to the computer. When you're writing down prose, when you're writing a short story, for example, like I am, you are writing down some abstract idea that only exists in your head, and you're trying to put it down into specific words that would make sense to people. And in both cases, good writing and a good end result comes only after rigorous editing, at least in my mind. So when you write down the implementation of an algorithm, the first time around you're only trying to get the algorithm right. You're only aiming to get the correct end result on the screen, on the user screen. And the first time when you're telling a story, you're actually telling the story to yourself. You have some abstract ideas and emotions and feelings that you want to pass to the reader, but you don't even know the story. You're just telling it to yourself to make sure that this thing makes sense. Then when you're editing the story, this is when you flesh it out. This is when you flesh out the characters. This is when you fill in all the names. This is when you fill in all the little details and you polish the edges and you make sure that everything makes sense and you fix your plot holes. It's the same when you're writing software, really. Once you know that your code is going to work, then you start focusing on readability and maintainability and performance and making sure that what you've written can actually stand the test of time and people can understand it. And you can only get better by writing and reading other people's work. When you're programming, you spend the majority of your time actually reading other people's code. You read your colleagues' code, you read the code in the documentation, and in that reading process, you uncover some patterns, some little details, some practices that you haven't seen before that you can then incorporate into your work. And when you're writing prose, it's the same. You have to write a lot and read a lot. And chances are that on your best day, you're only going to be able to write for a couple hours. Through that, your mind feels like it's gone through the blender. So what do? You read other people's work. You read the great classics. You read novels by writers that you admire. And then you look for inspiration there, you look for new ideas, sometimes even subconsciously. When you're reading something, it fits a missing piece into a puzzle in your head that helps you with a plot, or it helps you structure your story better, or it gives you an idea about a character, or it shows you how to convey a certain emotion, or how a person expresses a certain emotion. But in both cases, when you're programming and when you're writing, you're just trying to express some complex idea into specific terms that can be understood by other people. And that's why I say that programming's made me a better writer more than anything else. But I went on a really long tangent here. What I wanted to say is that I'm going to use this channel to talk about the interesting aspects of writing that happen when your pen is not pressed to the paper or when you're not in the Google Doc. And I would be happy to take you on this journey with me.